Hey there, Twins fans. What's going on? Welcome to Offseason Live. We are reacting to a big offseason milestone here. It is the non-tender deadline. It's Wednesday night right now, December 2nd. Wow, we're already in December. It's 8 o'clock, just about an hour ago, the non-tender deadline to tender contracts to pre-arbitration and arbitration-eligible players fell. And some big news for the Twins, so we're going to react to it. My name is Nick Nelson of TwinsDaily.com, joined here by fellow Twins Daily co-owner, Seth Stowe. Seth, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Yeah, we got a lot to talk about, and it all came down in the last 15, 20 minutes. So we're literally kind of reacting without giving it a whole lot of thought, which should make it fun. Hopefully we get a lot of questions.
Yeah, the details are going to be trickling in. So if you're here with us, we'll kind of be probably discovering some things live on the air, and you're welcome to comment, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Periscope. You can comment. We can see your comments. We can pull them on screen. Let us know if you see some news and we haven't mentioned it yet, or if you have any thoughts on anything we're going to be discussing. Some big news regarding some Twins players, some key fixtures, and at least one major surprise for all of us, I think. So we're going to get to that. David Young is also of TwinsDaily.com, one of our writers. David, how are you tonight?
You know, I'm doing all right. Nick. It's great to be here. And like we've already mentioned, some wild news tonight, as Michael Scott would say, oh, the turntables. So happy to be here tonight and happy to chat Twins baseball.
Yes, how the turntables do turn. So as I mentioned, we're going to be reacting to the non-tender deadline news regarding the Twins. We're going to talk about the decisions they made. We're going to talk about some players around the league who have become available and whether any of them might interest the Twins. But first, before we dive into all that, we're going to cover a few Twins news items here, just because we haven't had an episode in a little while and we want to get caught up and make sure everyone's heard all the latest news. So I think the two big things to come out over the past few days, it was basically made official. There's been some rumblings, but now we know that the Twins have reconfigured their minor league affiliate scheme. So the new AAA affiliate is the Crosstown St. Paul Saints. The new AA team, no longer Pensacola. It's going to be the Wichita Wind Surge. And then moving up to the high A level is the Cedar Rapids Colonels. And going to low A will be Fort Myers, the Mighty Muscles. Those two just flip-flop a little bit. But, of course, the big news here is Wichita coming to AA, a new team in the organization. Of course, the big news, the St. Paul Saints. So instead of Rochester, New York, the Twins AAA affiliate and all their top MLB-ready prospects are going to be just 20 minutes away at CHS Fields. Seth, you are, of course, the minor league guru. How are you feeling about these changes? Obviously, you had some attachments. You knew some people at the old organizations. That's a bummer, but overall pretty exciting, right?
Yeah, I mean, from a personal level, yeah, there's some people I probably won't talk to as much as I used to. But, I mean, from a fan standpoint for baseball in Minnesota, for the fact that the Twins are loaded with prospects in the upper levels, and if there's a full 2021 season, I mean, both Wichita and St. Paul should have a ton of prospects to watch. Wichita's got a new $75 million stadium, just a year old, I think. And obviously we all know what the Saints have done and how successful they've been. So some big exciting news. Yeah, and then the Midwest League flip-flopping with the Florida State League, which makes sense because all those minor leaguers that haven't played in the full season will be in Fort Myers. They'll start there before moving up the organizational ladder.
Awesome. Yeah, so if anyone else has any thoughts on these moves, we've got a big audience here. Please feel free to share your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you, however you're watching the stream here today. In my view, I think we can all agree that there have been a lot of bad, sad, terrible things to come out of the situation of the pandemic and the economic impact, but there have been some things that maybe are long overdue. And I think although it's sad to see teams and leagues getting wiped out, which is probably going to happen in the minor leagues, I think it makes all the sense in the world to have a more localized, regionalized minor league setup so that you can call someone up from AAA and they can come 20 minutes over from the St. Paul field as opposed to getting up and taking a 5 a.m. flight from Rochester. You can send guys to rehab at single A and they don't have to go all the way to Southwest Florida from Minneapolis. Now they're going to Wisconsin. So logistically, I think it makes sense. And then just for the Twins brand to have a AAA team and their top prospects over at CHS Field, a beautiful stadium in St. Paul. David, I know you've been writing at Twins Daily. The MN made stories of Minnesota-born players that came up to play for the Twins. And I just think that, wow, I mean, think about if Joe Mauer, think about if you could have caught him on his way up at AAA playing at CHS Field in St. Paul, 20 minutes from where he went to high school, how cool that would be.
I mean, it's incredible. And if you think about it, the St. Paul Saints are the mecca of independent baseball, and it's if you're going to choose an independent team to make a part of your MLB organization, the Saints are it, and that even more that it's the Minnesota Twins. It's wonderful. I had the chance to speak with and write an article on Caleb Thielbar a few weeks back. Thielbar played for the Saints. There's been quite a few other talented players that either on the back end of their career or even before sometimes, as in Thielbar's situation before he came back with the Twins, have played with teams like the Saints. And like you mentioned, we loved the Midway. It was long overdue for a stadium renovation in St. Paul, and CHS Field is about as beautiful of a minor league ballpark as you can get. And heck, if guys are getting called up, they can take the light rail over to Target Field. I think it really is exciting for Minnesota baseball fans. And like we already mentioned, it is a shame that through these tough times that a lot of teams are suffering economic hardships. But at the same time, this is really exciting for Minnesota baseball fans.
Yeah, I see Byron says, well, I don't necessarily support the loss of minor league teams. The new reorganization works. Yay, Cedar Rapids stays. I still haven't been to Cedar Rapids Stadium. I know Seth's been down there a few times. I need to take advantage of that, but we'll still be able to, so that's good news. Go Twinkies Go also says, I'm seeing a lot of angry St. Paul Saints fans. Seth, are you picking up on that too? And what's sort of maybe the reason behind that?
Yeah, I think there's some of that. I think there's some benefit of being independent. The American Association is a great league with a strong history. I did a couple of radio things in the last couple of days in Fargo, where they have the Fargo Moorhead Redhawks. And, there's a lot of people just aren't sure how the American Association is going to play without the Saints in it because they're such a big part of it. But, I mean, ultimately, for the Twins, it's a great thing, no doubt. And I think for the Saints and the Saints fans, it will be a good thing as well.
I agree. I think it will. And, it's just we've seen that independent minor league baseball can be precarious. It can be, I don't know, it can go away if the economic circumstances change. So I see this being very good for the Saints and their long-term continuity. They are now attached to a major league franchise. All right. The other news to touch on, Trevor May, we heard the other day that he was going to be signing with the New York Mets, the Twins losing their free agent, one of their top relievers from the bullpen this year. The details of that contract came down today. Sounds like he's going to be getting 2 years and $15.5 million from the Mets. We're going to talk about that, but I think we'll talk about that in the context of the rest of the conversation because there's been some impact on the bullpen from the arbitration decisions that the Twins made here at the non-tender deadline, which, without further ado, let's dive into the meat of tonight's discussion. Thank you again to all who are with us. Please feel free to share your thoughts and let us know if you're hearing things that we haven't mentioned yet, because as I mentioned, this is the news is trickling in as we speak. The non-tender deadline was just over an hour ago, but here's what we know. Out of the 8 Twins arbitration eligible players, they have tendered contracts to 6 of them. One of the non-tender decisions is not very surprising to us. As you can see here, Eddie Rosario, the left fielder, the slugger, the well-beloved, long-tenured, fiery outfielder, non-tendered, now a free agent. The big surprise, people were wondering about Taylor Rogers, who, yes, has been tendered a contract. We don't have the details yet. Matt Wisler, a name that, we did the arbitration eligible episode of Offseason Live a few weeks ago, and this was not a name that was by any means in question. I've never heard anyone even express any doubt that Matt Wisler would be brought back. At the rate, he stands to make maybe a little over $1 million, be very cheap. He was one of their best relievers this year, so that's shocking. We'll talk a little bit about that, but first, the guys that are going to be sticking around, the good news for Twins fans that like these guys, Caleb Thielbar, who David mentioned, a former Saint, had a huge bounce back year, really just a great story with the Twins in 2020. He's coming back his first year of arbitration. They agreed to a deal at 1 year, $650K, so just over the minimum. No big commitment there. Mitch Garver, in his first year of arbitration, agreed to a contract with the team for 1 year, $1.875 million. Tyler Duffy, one of their best relief pitchers, 1 year, $2.2 million. He's going to be back. Jose Barrios agreed to terms with the team on a 1 year, $6.1 million deal. Sounds like that has a $500K bonus. Taylor Rogers, as I mentioned, was tendered a contract. We don't know the details of that yet. But if anyone sees any details pop up on Twitter, please feel free to comment. I think those details could really come through any time. And then Byron Buxton, a 1 year deal worth $5.125 million. So For the most part, these decisions are what was expected. No huge surprises in terms of Thielbar, Garver, Duffy, Barrios, Buxton coming back. Taylor Rogers was a little bit up in the air, but it seemed like most people expected him to return. Let's talk a little bit about those sort of up in the air decisions and what went into them a little bit. So first, Taylor Rogers, the Twins closer, he was slated to make something like $6 to $7 million in his third year of arbitration, coming off a pretty tough year. So there was a little uncertainty whether he would be tendered that contract, but the Twins are indeed going to keep him around. David, what is your feeling on the fact that Rogers is going to be back with the Twins next year?
I think it's a good thing, Nick. I think that we all know that Rogers had what you could call an off year this last year. Didn't perform the way that he had in 2019. But at the same time, it was a 60-game season. He wasn't necessarily able to get in a groove. And obviously the Twins organization must have enough confidence in him that he can get back to his 2019 ways or something close to it this upcoming year. Especially, I know we haven't talked about it necessarily a whole lot yet, but the fact that they did not tender Matt Wisler, maybe that shows that they have a lot, not that those two have the same roles, but both were key components of the bullpen, and it shows the Twins have confidence, and I like the move.
Yeah, I mean, we've all talked about a lot about the fact that Rogers, the results were not very good, but his peripheral numbers, his velocity, a lot of that stuff, there were a lot of indications that he was getting unlucky this year, and it was, of course, a small sample. And Rogers has been so good for so long, so it sounds like that's really what the Twins are putting more stock into, right, Seth?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general he's been really good for about 3 years, and top relievers have hiccups that last a couple of months, which is what the 2020 season was. It was basically a couple of months, and with his stuff, with his velocity, with that slider, I'm guessing just a tweak to that, and he can be right back to form. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out, and it's interesting. You can bring up your thought on why his contract is the one we haven't heard of from our pre-show production meeting. But yeah, I'd like to see him stick around. I think he's been really good for a long time.
Yeah. So what's interesting to me is, as we mentioned, Trevor May. Who was maybe the best reliever for the Twins this past year, certainly up there with Rogers as one of the most talented, big strikeout, late inning bulldog types. Signed that 2-year, $15.5 million deal with the Mets. I think it's pretty plausible to say that Taylor Rogers, with 2 years of team control via arbitration remaining with the Twins, if they decided to keep him around both years, will probably make very close to that amount, which I think kind of presents an interesting. The Twins basically decided Rogers over May. Now, of course, May was a free agent, so it takes two to tango in that situation. But I did tweet out a little while ago a poll on this very topic on Twitter, and I said, if these guys are making the same amount over the next 2 years, which one would you rather have on the same deal? And with, after an hour or two here with 450 votes in, it is literally split right down the middle here. 51.1% in favor of Trevor May, 48.9% in favor of Trevor Rogers. So I think that's kind of interesting. And I'm not even exactly sure where I land, because I feel I was a lot more confident in May at the end of this year. But Rogers has that track record, a lot more durability. He stayed healthier. He hasn't had as many ups and downs. How do you sort of weigh these two, Seth? And if you had the option to take this deal for one or the other, which one would you choose?
Oh, I think you take Rogers every time. As much as May is exciting, he has been very up and down throughout his career. He's had 2-month stretches where he's been bad, and he has had 2-month stretches where he's very, very good. Whereas, like you said, Rogers has been pretty consistent until this 2-month season. So I think, it's very possible that Rogers saw what May got, the front office saw what May got, and, he should get a contract that's more than that. And I would say that's true. But yeah, if they're the same price, and I think sometimes polls like this, it's recency bias. The guy that's gone is, of course, the guy that everyone wanted them to bring back. But if they bring them back, then the Twins aren't doing anything because they didn't add anybody new. So, sometimes you don't know what you're going to get. So I like this poll because I think it's a fair question, because both of these guys were very relied upon, along with Tyler Duffy, who I think he was their best, most consistent this year for the 2 months, but that gave them a 1-2-3 punch that now I'm wondering who's number 3 in 2021.
Yeah, same here. So I see we have Power Trip quotes. Says Taylor Rogers is hideous, and also says Boof Bonzer over Taylor Rogers. Those do sound like some Power Trip quotes. Yeah, it's really tough. I hate losing May. I would not like losing Rogers either. But as I mentioned sort of before the show, I do wonder if the fact that Rogers being the only contract details that have not come in, or at least had not at the start of the show, might mean there's something brewing, maybe like a multi-year deal. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if the Twins came out and said, we're signing you to the same deal that Trevor May just signed, essentially. It's maybe a little less than Rogers would make if he played it year to year for 2 more years, but it gives him that security, which I think is great. David, first of all, do you think that that's a possibility? Any heat to that? And also, who would you take if you had this option laid out in front of you?
Yeah, well, I think that you mentioned security. That's a big thing for Taylor Rogers, especially coming off a season that he knows was not his best. Again, it was 60 games, but did not have a great season. And even if he were to go potentially year to year and make more, I think one of the reasons that we haven't seen his deal right now is, like you mentioned, that maybe they're preparing a 2-year deal for a little bit less, but there is that security there. And on the mental side of baseball, that could be big for Taylor Rogers. Baseball's a game of pressure, and it's a very mental sport. And obviously, these guys that are playing are the best at what they do. But even regardless of that, there's still that mental pressure. And so I do think that they'll sign him to a 2-year deal. And when it comes to the argument of Rogers and May, I think I appreciate Trevor May more now that he's no longer with us. And it makes me wish I would have appreciated him more, like Seth did when he was with the Twins. The guy could strike out guys, and especially this last year. And maybe that's one of the reasons why the poll shifted in his favor. But I hate to see him go, but at the end of the day, I'd probably keep Rogers.
Yeah, so, I mean, Rogers was up in the air a little bit, but not a huge surprise to see him back. He's been a crucial member of that bullpen and the Twins closer, of course. Let's move into the more surprising decisions. As we mentioned, Trevor May, a big right-handed power arm gone. A lot of strikeouts you're losing there, a lot of missed bats. And now on top of that, Matt Wisler, which is a decision that, unlike May, the Twins had all the control over and seemed like a no-brainer. He made less than $1 million in his first year with the Twins. I think that was his first shot at arbitration. Was not in line to make a lot of money this year. Was a huge success story for this front office. They turned him into a high-powered weapon who opened games for them, closed games for them, unleashed that filthy slider. And the Twins are moving on despite what looked like a pretty small price tag. And so now they've lost Wisler, May, and of course Romo and Clippard out in free agency. That's a lot of high leverage, big right-handed innings that we've lost from a bullpen that was excellent in 2020. Seth, I mean, I know we're all kind of shocked, but as you try to make sense of this, what could be the reason behind it? I know that one person mentioned here, let's see, where was it? Whistler, surprising. Byron says, assuming they're looking at a smaller re-sign option, it doesn't get much lower than he was expected to make. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it is very surprising. As you mentioned earlier in the show, he wasn't even a name that we thought of as a possibility for a non-tender, even in this year where I think there's probably more non-tenders than ever with the way it is. But he was so valuable in that he was used in multiple roles. Yeah, he started in low leverage, but by midseason he was he was an opener. And late in the season, he even got a save opportunity and was working 8th and 9th innings. So very, very surprising. Is like you said, he probably would have made $1.5 million at the most this coming year. What it tells me is, and John Bonus mentioned this in our offseason blueprint episode. Go back and watch that if you haven't already. But he talked about feeling incredibly confident in what the Twins front office has shown they can do in getting quality bullpen arms kind of out of nowhere. And Wisler was an example of that. It's almost like they used him and he's gone now. And, he used through so many sliders. Maybe they don't want to bring him back. But, I mean, to be fair, they have claimed Ian Jabot. They've claimed Brandon Waddell. They've recently signed Derek Law, who's got, I think, 4 or 5 years of major league experience and a big slider to a minor league deal. So, I mean, there will have options, and who knows, they may also be interested in bringing in some other veteran relievers on deals as well.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I'm baffled by this decision, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, these idiots, what are they thinking? Because, I mean, this is the front office that went and got Matt Wisler, who no one was thinking about when he was claimed off waivers last year and turned him into this weapon. So the only thing I can think of is that they feel that they've kind of gotten the peak value out of him. And they're looking at a market where a lot of players like him and even higher quality are being non-tendered hitting the market. There's probably going to be a lot of free agent relievers sitting around at the end of the free agency period available on very cheap, maybe even minor league non-guaranteed deals. And they're saying we're going to be able to take our pick. We obviously know what we're doing here. So we're going to try to use that roster spot and take another intriguing project or even maybe someone a little more established. What do you think, David? You think that's the calculus here?
Yeah, well, I like what you said. It's not like we can look at the front office and say, you idiots, because they're not idiots. Falvey and Levine have shown that they know what they're doing. But at the same time, as a fan, it's tough to look at it and from the fan perspective make sense of it. I mean, if you look at the bullpen last year, Matt Wisler pitched 18 games, 25.1 innings, and had a 1.07 ERA. Those led the Twins for all relievers. And obviously, you look at a relief staff different than you look at a starting rotation. But he was rock solid and he was effective. But at the same time, I'm a kid in St. Peter. I'm not the one running this team. And I think that you've got to trust the front office here. I think that, obviously he wasn't going to be extremely expensive, but they must have something on their minds if they made this move.
They must, and it's going to be interesting to follow and see where they go from here with the bullpen, because now not a lot of spots really accounted for at this point. We talked about Tyler Duffy brought back. He's got a guaranteed deal. He will be back. Jorge Alcala will presumably be back. We know Caleb Thielbar is coming back. Outside of that, Cody Stashak, I'm sure will probably factor in to the mix, but not really a lot of guys. I mean, like we mentioned, a lot of veteran, established, reliable guys being pulled out of the mix here and a lot of spots to fill. So I would say the offseason just got a little more interesting.
I'd add too that I fully expect them to converse with Wisler. Maybe in an arbitration case, he would have got 1.5 and they'd prefer to get him for 1, and maybe they still will. But it's surprising they couldn't have worked out a deal or something for him. But I mean, as you brought up, they tried to deal Eddie Rosario and teams aren't really dealing. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so just looking at a couple comments from people here. Sean says, very surprised about Wisler, curious about the bullpen plan with May's departure. Perhaps one more impactful signing and a few lottery, lower-cost project. Silk says, pretty surprised about this. Can't imagine it was a money-based move with his salary. Maybe they know something about him we don't. That's about all I could really – I mean, they must, because based on everything we know, he was phenomenal. There was nothing fluky. I mean, no one has a 1.07 ERA, and it's like, oh, yeah, that's obviously a little extreme, but his didn't allow many hits, struck out tons of guys, huge swinging strike rate. Yes, the control was a little iffy, but still, I don't know. Shocking move. So as we move on here to the big talker, I know this is the one that there's going to be a lot of reaction to, and we've already seen a lot of reaction to it. Eddie Rosario, non-tendered. Eddie Rosario has been with the Twins since 2015, one of their longest tenured players, certainly been one of their most productive players. He has led the team in RBIs each of the last 3 seasons. I don't think any of us are surprised by this. As I mentioned, we've been talking on these offseason live shows. This has been the expectation. The price tag was just a little high for the player you're getting, and the Twins have some depth to replace Eddie Rosario. It's tough to see him go. We all love Eddie Rosario. Seth, I mean, I know you see the logic to it, but I'm sure there's a part of you as a fan and a guy who has maybe mentioned a couple times that you really love watching Eddie Rosario.
I do love watching Eddie Rosario play baseball, in case anyone was wondering.
You gotta be bummed out about it to an extent, right?
Well, certainly. And as you know, I wrote the top 60 Twins in the 60 years in Minnesota, and I had him in my list at like 32. So I think we need to take a step back from all the analytics and what he isn't and what he can't be, and just kind of look back and say he's had a really good 5 or 6 year run here in Minnesota. And I feel like sometimes we take away that fact. We can be excited about not having him. I think if this were a normal year where we had fans in the stands and not a 60-game season, and we had any idea what's going to happen in those terms in 2021, what he's going to make. I mean, we've seen $9.6 million. Most years, that's a contract you'd probably just pick up if you didn't have Alex Kirilloff ready and Trevor Larnach very close and Brent Rooker having made his debut, and he'll be back to go along with Lamont Wade and Jake Cave. I think those two factors make it an easy decision. But at the same time, I fully understand that there's a lot of fans that simply love watching him play. I loved watching him get thrown out at third base, and you say that was ridiculous for him to do it. But how many times did he get to third, or how many times did he score by taking the extra base? You take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and there you have Eddie Rosario. So I've used that one before too.
I mean, he's an aggressive player, and sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't. It does seem to my eyes like it's been paying off less and less frequently as he's frankly lost some athleticism. His sprint speed has declined. His defense has not rated well, and there really he's never been an on-base asset. So I think that it's just, we all know that he's a good power hitter. And one thing that I do love about Eddie Rosario, and I think Paul Molitor used to say this, that it's always good to have one guy in your lineup who, when a pitcher on the other side is just cruising, just untouchable, shutting down all of your good hitters, you still have that one guy who can hit him, who can throw out the end of the bat and get a big hit and break you out of that no-hitter or that shutout. And Eddie was that, and I think back to 2018, a season where the offense just stunk, basically, for the most part. And there was a lot of times where Rosario was the only guy carrying it. I remember one game where he hit 3 home runs, including a walk-off against Cleveland. I'll never forget it. So it does suck to lose that electricity, doesn't it, David? Who, by the way, Kay Christensen says, that's a healthy mustache, David. And I know we all got to agree with that.
But yeah, with Rosario, it's tough because you could say it's like, it's like watching a burning dumpster fire, and that you can't look away in the sense that, I shouldn't say a burning dumpster fire is beautiful.
It's a little harsh.
Some of the stuff that he does is absolutely beautiful. Some of the throws that he makes, some of the, aggressive base running, it's incredible. But at the same time, like Seth said earlier, if this was a normal season, maybe you'd pick him up if you didn't have guys like Kirilloff, Rooker, and Larnach coming up, as well as Jake Cave and Lamont Wade. But it's certainly, there's going to be some spike. There's some spike that we're going to miss this next year, not having Eddie Rosario.
Yeah, he gives the Twins an edge, and we all like having an edge. The Twins are going to lose Rosario here. They're probably going to lose Sergio Romo unless they can find a way to bring him back. It's nice to have that edge, right? And we all have complained a lot, maybe in the Mauer Morneau years, that the Twins are a little too milquetoast and don't really have that edge. So, I think great points all around. I see some comments coming through. If you're watching on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, wherever, please feel free to share your comments. So let us know what you think about the Twins moving on from Eddie Rosario, who you'd like to see replace him, where you think he might end up. Go Twinkies Go says, wonder where this leaves Jake Cave in the roster makeup. Definitely a possible opportunity for him. We'll talk a little bit about the future plan here in a moment. Sean says, I have wondered whether Rosario could serve as a better bat, worse fielding Marwin replacement. I think he could play 3B, 2B, 1B for a game a week. Is it weird? It is weird to think we won't pay Rosario what we paid Marwin. I don't think the Twins would have paid Marwin what they paid him by choice at this point in 2020. And that's kind of the thing. Rosario has shown some signs of wearing down. With the way his defense is declining in the outfield, I'd have a hard time trying to have him learn an infield position personally. I do know he's played some second base, and he did. Seth, he played third base briefly once in a major league game, right?
Well, there was one play that he made in one game.
Yeah. Sweet.
That was a great running throw, and it was perfect, and everyone smiled and laughed like he had been doing it forever.
Yeah,
that'd be a pretty thing though. Him in the end not be a pretty thing at this stage.
Tanner says he has a great arm, but not the best base runner. He always has people on the edge of their seats. Sometimes good, sometimes not, and that's the truth, right? We're going to be losing a majorly entertaining player, maybe a little divisive. Go Twinkie Go says, declining. Was he ever an above average defender? He was. And when he first came up, he was a good left fielder. He's really lost speed and lost a lot of range in the outfield, at least according to the metrics. So where do the Twins go from here? They're losing their biggest run producer. I mean, over the last 3 years, Eddie Rosario has 50 more RBIs than any other Twin. Now, I think we should not exaggerate what that means. He's been hitting cleanup on a great lineup. Anyone who's hitting in that spot who's a quality hitter is going to be racking up RBIs. And I assure you, whoever takes over for him, if they're a good hitter, like Alex Kirilloff or someone along those lines, they're going to be driving in plenty of runs. I'm not too worried about that. But still, Eddie Rosario leaves big shoes to fill. So I saw that Bob Nightingale of USA Today tweeted earlier today that Alex Kirilloff, the Twins' first-round pick in 2016, is the early favorite to replace Eddie Rosario in left field. He made his MLB debut in Game 2 of the Wild Card playoffs against the Astros, of course. We all know that, and we know that he looked pretty dang good for a guy who's never played in an MLB game before. I think that's what most people expected, was that he was sort of in line. Most of us probably would expect that he would start in the minors. If the Twins wait 6 or 7 weeks to call him up, they would get an extra year of service time. And as much as many of us don't like that system, you kind of got to work with it if it's in place. So, David, what's your thoughts? Could you see the Twins going straight to Kirilloff to start next year? Do you think they could go with someone like Cave or Wade, sign someone to maybe fill in the spot for a little bit, or where would you expect them to go now?
Yeah, well, I've got a lot of thoughts. First of all, I got to say, new comparison. Watching Eddie Rosario is not like watching a dumpster fire. It's like watching The Office. It's beautiful, but it's also cringy at times. That's a better analogy.
And it got a lot worse toward the end.
Yes, sadly. That is sad but true. But I think Kirilloff is probably the most probable option here. He was recently ranked as the top Twins prospect now, and he's got the bat. He's got the fielding skills, but at the same time, I don't think you put him in there as regularly as you would have put a Rosario. I think you put in a Jake Cave, you put in a Lamont Wade Jr., you put in a Brent Rooker, and I know that we've talked more so of Rooker being more of a DH potentially, but he's one of those guys I think where when he's not DHing, let's say they re-sign Nelson Cruz, he's a bat that you want to have in the lineup. He's a strong bat. Seth had him on for Twin Spotlight a few weeks ago. Great guy from good old Rocky Top, Tennessee. And he's someone that we shouldn't sleep on as well. But I think that Kirilloff is certainly the number one option at this point.
Sounds like Go Twinkies Go agrees with you. He says, Alex, day one, or we riot, asterisk, in a Minnesotan nice manner. Okay, well, there you go. That sounds very nice. So, Seth, I mean, as David mentioned, there's a lot of options, basically, and that's sort of one of the things that was an impetus to move on from Rosario. You've got Kirilloff, you've got Larnach, you've got Rooker, you've got Wade and Cave already on deck, are already sort of as Major League depth. What direction do you think they will go out of the gates next year in left field, assuming that Rosario is not back? I should mention that there is a possibility they could sign him at a lower number. That's not out of the question. Right. But, assuming that they're moving on from him, what do you think they will do and what do you think they should do?
I mean, if this was still Terry Ryan's team, Alex Kirilloff would be the opening day starter next year in left field. But under this regime, I think it'd be silly for them not to at least play the game service time, keep him in the minors for 3 weeks and get an extra year, or keep him, like you said, for 6 or 7 or 8 weeks and keep him under Super 2 for an extra year. That said, I think the fact that they lost an entire year of playing, I would have no problem with the Twins starting Kirilloff, Rooker, any of these guys at AAA. The Saints would probably appreciate that. The Wichita Wind Surge will probably appreciate that as well. I think they have a legit reason. Let's get them some games. And you've got Wade, you've got Cave, you've got some other guys that can play. We've talked about a super utility type of a player who could maybe play some in the outfield maybe. I feel like that's where they'll start, but I think Kirilloff will be up within about a month.
Yeah, I think as much as I do agree with the sentiment of put the best players on the field, don't worry about the service time thing, that'll work itself out. I just, if you're talking about a trade-off of getting maybe an extra 6 weeks of Alex Kirilloff in his most raw, inexperienced form at age, 22, compared to the fact that you would be, by waiting and using someone like Wade and Cave, who are perfectly capable players, not as good as Alex Kirilloff, not as talented, but you let them fill in for a little bit, and you get an extra year of control over Kirilloff in his prime at age like 28. That to me, that's a no-brainer as long as that system is in place. And this isn't a situation like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. or like Ronald Acuna, where it's just a disgrace to not have this player on your major league team. As you mentioned, Seth, he's a young kid, barely played at AAA, did not get to play at all last year. I don't think there's anything that egregious about sending him to AAA to sharpen up for a few weeks. Let some of the Twins fans go see him over at CHS Field and then call him up, when the situation dictates. If the guys are struggling, if they get hurt, if Kirilloff is absolutely tearing it up, or Larnach or Rooker, you make the move then. Do you sort of, David, do you agree with that thinking?
Yeah, I do. And I think that certainly the point that you guys just made about, service time is important. And I think that especially with minor league baseball back in play this year, I think that getting Kirilloff some at-bats, I would love to see him up as soon as possible. I think it is important. Instead of throwing him to the Wolves, even though he's only played one game, obviously, but getting him more well-groomed is important.
Nick, let me add one thing to that too, I guess, just because I feel like it's important with a 22-year-old like Kirilloff. With Rooker already being 26, his next 6 years are going to take you to his age 31, age 32 season. Call him up on opening day and let him get a month where he's just the guy. And then I think play the service time game with a guy like Kirilloff, or obviously at some point that'll come into play with Royce Lewis or Larnach. But I think Rooker's a guy, because he is already 26 and did, miss so much time last year, because of the missed season, he had an injury the year before. If he's ready opening day and he's healthy, and it sounds like he just started taking some swings this week, I think you go with him too, and platoon him with Cave. Cave deserves an opportunity. He's played well in his role. Wade needs an opportunity, or they should consider dealing him. They've got all this depth. I mean, we could talk about their depth, and that I think gives the best explanation for why you non-tender Eddie Rosario.
Not to mention the number of other corner outfield bats that have now become available. And I see some people asking about other players that were non-tendered that the Twins might take an interest in. We will talk about that in just a moment to sort of wrap up the conversation. But first, I want to talk a little bit about where you guys think that Eddie Rosario might land now that he is a free agent. David, I know this is something that you've been looking into, and funnily enough, I think two of the top targets, at least two, maybe two or three. I saw someone said earlier that they heard some steam about Rosario and the Tigers. Of course, Gardy's not there anymore. He left, but the Tigers could certainly be a team that would take interest in him as a big bat to add some energy to their lineup. But even more so, there's a couple teams in this division that could really use big bat corner outfielder in the White Sox and Cleveland Indians. I'm sure those are a couple teams that have been on your radar. David, who else are you looking at as possible fits for Eddie Rosario now that he's a free agent? You're muted, my friend.
I was indeed muted. Gotta love that 2020 technology.
But
I'm doing a little bit of, you could call it scientific research. But when you look at Eddie Rosario, chances of him getting a contract anywhere at, $9 million up is minimal. But when you look at other teams in the AL Central, if you look at Cleveland, if they do not stay with Carlos Santana, Josh Naylor may move to first base. That creates an opportunity in the outfield. You look at the Detroit Tigers, Jordan Zimmerman. That's someone, a pitcher of theirs who may not stick around, and that frees up some money. You look at the Kansas City Royals. Alex Gordon is retiring after a successful career. That creates a spot in the outfield. You also look at the Colorado Rockies, a team that has Trevor Story, Charlie Blackmon, but outside of that, they don't have a lot of power with their bats. So that's another team that I think more of an outside shot, but is a possibility. I see that Ron says the Mets. You never know. There's connections with the Twins there, obviously with May. And was it Jeremy or who was the pitching coach or the coach? Was it Affeldt?
Hefner.
Jeremy Hefner.
Jeremy Affeldt's the actor. Jeremy Hefner, yes. And that's a possibility. Is he going to sign with the team next year? and start in the outfield? I believe so. Yes. It's not going to be for that $9 million plus, but it is going to be somewhere. And in my opinion, I would not be surprised if it's in the AL Central.
Yeah, Rosario is not a player with no value. He just has, frankly, a lot less value to the Twins than he would to a lot of other teams. Because as Michael mentions here in the comments, Kirilloff, Rooker, and Larnach, Twins outfield prospects knocking on the door, made the Rosario decision an easy one. And I think that is basically the bottom line on this one. Speaking of, we were talking about Kirilloff. I'd be curious to know, Go Twinkies Go said, did Kirilloff get any kind of service time accumulation by being on the postseason roster? My understanding is no. Seth, that's you're shaking your head. That's a no-go, right? Yeah. So he hasn't sparked anything. What was that?
I think he got paid for the day.
Oh, well, I mean, I would hope so.
For 2 days. I would add this, Nick. I think the front runner for me is the Miami Marlins. First, he lives and has lived, and his whole family lives in Miami. Miami needs more players, and also he's got a great relationship with James Rowson, who's their hitting coach. So I think, to me, that's the favorite. But you mentioned the White Sox. They non-tendered Nomar Mazara. Right field, which is really Eddie Rosario's best position, is available there. Obviously, they're going to continue to go with Jimenez in left, and I don't know who they'll throw out in center. Maybe that Robert guy who was pretty –
okay.
But yeah, he could fit into right field for the White Sox and beat up on the Twins pitching for 2-3 years. I could very easily see them doing that because they know that's the kind of move that's going to make noise.
Yeah, I mean, Miami, for some reason, I can just already envision Eddie Rosario in a Miami uniform. It just feels like it would look right. And he does seem like a good fit for that team for all the reasons you mentioned. So I'm going to be keeping a close eye on them. So the Twins have opened up a couple more holes on their roster to fill this offseason. The good news, I guess, is that a lot of new players have entered the market and become options for the Twins and other teams with the non-tender deadline today. So what I've pulled up on the list here, or on the screen here, is a list of just a bunch of notable names, I would say, that were non-tendered and became free agents at the deadline today. These players are generally going to be probably on the inexpensive side and probably happy to come sign with a contending team that has some money to spend now with Rosario's money off the books and I guess Matt Wisler's money off the books. So some of the names that we've got on here, Carlos Rodon from the Chicago White Sox, left-handed starting pitcher, Jose Martinez, the outfield and first base, maybe more of a DH type from the Chicago Cubs. Nomar Mazara, who Seth mentioned, an outfielder for the White Sox. Adam Duvall, an outfielder for the Braves. Tyler Naquin of the Indians. Michael Franco, third baseman for KC. David Dahl, an outfielder for the Rockies, a former top prospect. That one was a little surprising to see him hit the market. If he was right-handed, he would be pretty intriguing to me. But alas, Archie Bradley, the right-handed relief pitcher for the Reds. I think that one was pretty surprising, and that non-tender sadly probably ruins my dreams of the Twins acquiring Raisel Iglesias because they're probably going to stick with him now that they don't have that redundancy at the back of the bullpen. Ryan Stanek, the right-handed reliever from the Marlins. Travis Shaw, Brewers third baseman. Hanser Alberto, second baseman from Baltimore. Danny Santana, a former Twin, an outfielder from the Rangers, was non-tendered. Chasen Shreve, a left-handed reliever from the Mets. Delino DeShields Jr., outfielder for Cleveland. Chichi Gonzalez, a right-handed starter from Colorado. Kyle Schwarber, the Cubs outfielder, again, maybe more of a DH type. So certainly some names here. I see that Lavergne Rene mentions that with these guys being non-tendered, do you see the Twins trying to get Archie Bradley or Carlos Rodon? Quite honestly, those were two of the names on this list that stood out most to me. Rodon, a former top draft pick, top prospect, very good young left-handed pitcher for the White Sox. He's had some serious injury problems, but man, when he's going right, he's got a nasty fastball slider combo. Seems like a guy the Twins could work with if they could get him cheap. And of course, Archie Bradley, a power right-handed reliever, which, as we've discussed, Trevor May gone, Matt Wisler gone. The Twins could use some guys in that category. As you look over this list and maybe some of the names that aren't even mentioned here, this is not a comprehensive list. Seth, who are the guys that stand out to you as possible Twins targets?
Well, I was very excited about Corey Knebel being non-tendered, but he has since been traded to the Dodgers for a player to be named later or cash. So I guess that's not going to happen. I guess one pitcher, well, we're all interested in Archie Bradley. I think we can agree with that. He's going to make a lot of money, very much a Trevor May type of a category there. Kind of a Ryan Stanek is another high prospect, high draft pick that really hasn't paid off yet. He's been used in various roles by the Rays and the Marlins as an opener, but also he throws really hard and has a slider. So let's see what he can do. The hitter that I'm intrigued by, and Matt Trueblood brought this up during the season at the trade deadline when we were hoping the Twins might add a right-handed bat, Hanser Alberto. He's the last couple of years played second base, third base, some in the outfield, mostly between second and third, kind of half and half. But if you look at a right-handed hitter to team with Luis Arraez, so he should get some playing time there. And again, backup or insurance for a potential Josh Donaldson DL or injured list stint. I think that's a guy that, we talked about Profar, and maybe he's the more exciting name, but Alberto as a right-handed hitter, I think fits a need that I don't think that would be a bad signing, or it might be an underappreciated signing if the Twins did it.
Yeah. David, on your end, as you look at this list and some of the players that have become available, several surprises, what are the names that stand out to you that you'd like to see the Twins maybe pursue?
Yeah, well, I got to echo Seth on Hanser Alberto. Righty bat could certainly fit into the Twins lineup, but that was somebody that I thought about more so than an hour ago when we found out that Matt Wisler was being non-tendered. So that's when I think Archie Bradley comes into the conversation. The guy's got stuff, and he could really, I think, fill a hole in the Twins bullpen. But another player that I want to talk about is Danny Santana, former Twin. Had a much more fruitful career in 2019 with the Rangers. I believe he batted .283, 28 homers, 81 RBI, was their player of the year. Obviously, 2020 was not the year for him that he had hoped for, that the Rangers had hoped for. But I know he's listed as an outfielder, but he can be a utility man too. And that's a hole that the Twins have that we've talked about quite a bit this offseason so far. And while I'm not 100% sold on him, if he could put up numbers like he did at the plate, like he did in 2019, that could be something.
Yeah, so I see Patrick here in the chat also says Danny Santana could be a good pickup if he can play infield/outfield as a backup. Also, Max the Cat says hi. Hi, Max. Max the Cat.
Max.
Max the Cat was a star of the free agent starting pitching episode, as I recall. So we're glad to have him meowing his way around here. Yeah, as you mentioned, Santana has mostly been playing outfield. He can play center field, which is nice, of course, with Byron Buxton being a constant injury risk. And he came up originally as a shortstop. He kind of moved away from that position because he wasn't very good there. But as a utility man who can occasionally fill in around the infield, and a switch hitter, I think that there is some intrigue if you get him at a low dollar amount, low risk, and maybe have that reunion. John says, is Nomar Mazara pretty much just Eddie Rosario? Yeah, I think is he right-handed? Yeah, no. But yeah, he's like a lesser Eddie Rosario, so not anyone I would be looking at too much. But if you're interested in finding out some of the players who maybe would be good fits among the free agent crop to possibly come into left field or fill like a dual left field outfield DH role in the event that Nelson Cruz moves on, you can go back on our YouTube or our podcast, and we did an episode several weeks back of this off-season live show where we went through a bunch of options that we liked for that particular role. So I recommend going back to check that out. Renee says Adam Duvall could be a nice fit. Certainly we now have a need in the outfield with Eddie Rosario departing. So like I mentioned, there's a lot of outfield talent out there, which is another thing that in addition to the Twins already having so much depth was just another reason not to really even consider overpaying or paying whatever the amount that Eddie Rosario is going to get. So,
and I'd add to that, Nick, that adding an outfielder, in my opinion, doesn't make a ton of sense unless it's like a Profar who can also play infield. And guys like Adam Duvall, is he a replacement for Nelson Cruz? I really feel like this depth conversation that we've had kind of solidifies our thoughts that, is it really that important that the Twins bring back Nelson Cruz? Duvall could fit into that, but Duvall is a older version of Brent Rooker. And in fact, early in 2019, he spent 3 months in the minor leagues and got called up by the Braves late. So, I mean, he's had some ups and downs in just the last couple of years. So, Rennie, I also got to give you a hard time just because hopefully when this COVID stuff is done, you can come back out and we can barbecue or something like that.
Rennie, not Renee. Sorry. I'm just so bad at pronouncing anything. So Ron says Rodon would not be too expensive, but would be an injury risk. No one can deny that. But the Twins, I guess that's kind of the nice thing, and we've talked about this in the free agent starting pitching episode and the trade episode. The Twins have a solid playoff core in their rotation basically already. They're bringing back Barrios, who, as we mentioned, re-signing on a $6.1 million deal. Michael Pineda will be back. And, of course, Kenta Maeda, the Cy Young runner-up, will be back. So there is an opportunity to maybe take a gamble on someone like a Carlos Rodon and not necessarily be depending entirely on him to fill a spot in your rotation, because they still have Randy Dobnak, and there's going to be some other starting pitchers out there that you could take a shot at as well. So Rennie says, Seth, I've been waiting for the invite. So there you go. Frank says it is not vital to bring back Cruz, too old. And I think that's kind of where most of us land. Seth and John and I did a Blueprints episode where we kind of came up with our own little plans for the Twins offseason in the most recent episode of Offseason Live. And none of us had the Twins re-signing Nelson Cruz or Eddie Rosario. So when you look at the money that's available to spend and sort of the ways you could build this roster in more sort of modular, functional ways, I think there's a pretty good argument to be made for it. So as we wrap up here, we're letting all this news soak in, kind of reacting on the spot and absorbing it as you all are. But we really appreciate you guys all joining us and hanging out with us and talking about it. If you have any final thoughts on the Twins moving on from Eddie Rosario and Matt Wisler, bringing back Taylor Rogers, or thoughts on any of these sort of players who have now become available and whether any of them would be fits for the Twins, feel free to comment. We'll call them out. But let's pick up some final thoughts here. Seth, I do want to mention or talk a little bit about what you mentioned. You do have a new book available, an ebook available for $7.99 that people can find at Twins Daily. A great read here in the cold winter months with everyone stuck inside. If you want to just get lost in some Twins history, if you want to maybe talk about that just briefly.
Yeah, it's like I said earlier, the top 60 Twins players in the past 60 years that they've been in Minnesota. And it's a lot of fun. A guy named Chris has been updating his top 300 Twins prospects for the last 10 years. And I thought it'd be fun to kind of put together his 60, and we did include all 300. So it's a lot of fun to see where the current players are and who those guys are in that 250 to 300 range, because there's a lot of good memories there. Also, it's not this cover, but it doesn't. It's just an ebook, unlike Versus, which is Nick's new book, which you should get. So
we're all writing books out here. It's the thing to do, I guess. Yes, I did release a new book on video games. It's not Twins related, but if that interests you, check out versusbook.com and you can learn a little bit about that. A great Christmas present, I must say, for that gamer in your life. A few final thoughts coming in here. I see Nate. Oh, Nate's got a nice big comment. Says, I'm not anti-Rosario, but it's time to see some of these kids while they're cheap. Rosario is likely to be overpaid, and if his career takes off elsewhere, it's probably because of something he wasn't getting from the Twins coaching-wise. He's been average most days, an all-star some days, and subpar on others. I enjoyed rooting for him and wish him well, but there's no amount that would be fair to him that is a good deal/fit for this team. That is a great cogent thought, Nate, and a lengthy thought. You should come on over to twinsdaily.com and write a blog post and get all those thoughts scrawled out for our audience. But I think you're kind of on the same page as us. I think we all pretty much agree with that. Personally, if Eddie Rosario and Alex Kirilloff cost the same amount, I would take Kirilloff. I'm just ready to move on from Rosario, and unfortunately, the last memories of my head in him, as much as I have so many great memories of all the great things he did here, were the mountainous, just compiling blunders of this season. So many mistakes that he made, so many frustrating gaffes and mental errors and lack of concentration and thinking. And then just his last moment in a Twins uniform that we'll remember him from was in the playoffs, barking at an umpire in a situation where maybe he had a right to be frustrated, but in a moment where you cannot afford to get kicked out of a game if you're a leader of this team and a big time player who's going to be a game changer. Gets kicked out in the 6th inning of that 1-1 ball game between the Twins and Astros. His spot in the lineup came up 2 innings later as the go-ahead run. Jake Cave was batting in his place, struck out, chasing something wildly out of the zone. Big money Eddie, big time Eddie. Eddie, the big chanted name. The clutch player was not even here in the final big clutch moment where they needed him. And unfortunately, that's my lasting memory. I don't know, David, what do you take away as Eddie Rosario walks away into the sunset here?
Yeah, well, I think, like you said, Nick, we all have a lot of memories of Eddie, and while a lot of those fresh ones aren't necessarily good, for me, it is hard to not remember some of those great memories. And obviously, we've been hard on him at times, but we wish him nothing but the best of luck with his future in professional baseball. He's been a good ambassador for the Twins. Yeah, unless he's with
Chicago
or Cleveland.
Yeah, but in all honesty, that outfield combo of him, Kepler, and Buxton, well, they maybe didn't come to the potential that we thought they maybe would a couple of years back. They've been awfully fun to watch, and he's made some exciting plays. So, all things aside, nothing but the best of luck to him. But I think it is time to move on.
I'm with you. So it's going to be some big decisions ahead for the Twins. They've got some spots to fill. Of course, you can always come to twinsdaily.com, find coverage of things as it's happening. And here on the Offseason Live show, we've run through, we had a preset schedule where we went through sort of these regimented themed episodes covering free agency, the trade market, the blueprints, as I mentioned, that we kind of put out there. So if you go to our YouTube page or our podcast, you can find these previous episodes. TF Twins. Tom says Nick and Seth should be non-tendered from the stream for their lack of mustache.
Wow. Beard.
I got some Rogaine in my trunk. I can ship it out priority mail.
I have a good scruff. So the pre-scheduled episodes of Offseason Live are now done, but we're going to be doing stuff like this all offseason. When a timely milestone comes up or if some big news comes up, we'll try to hop on and do a little stream and chat with y'all. You guys are amazing. Tons of interaction. We love getting the comments from you guys. Scrub Nation says Odorizzi should be a priority in my opinion. I agree. I think a top priority at this point. Michael says looks like Twins payroll stands at $87 million with Rosario and Wisler now out of the picture. How do you see them spending an additional $30 to $35 million to fill out this roster? And we're out of time here to dive deep into that one here tonight, but I will tell you, as I mentioned, tons of past episodes of Offseason Live that you can go check out if you want to download the podcast and listen or watch the videos on YouTube. More than welcome. And we'll keep bringing out the episodes. We'll keep bringing out the content on twinsdaily.com. So hopefully you guys will keep reading. Let us know what you like, what you want us to do, what you want to see more of. We're all about it. So Seth, as we sign off here, any final thoughts? What's sticking with you here as the news sets in of the Twins non-tender deadline decisions?
I've been waving like crazy for those on the podcast. You can't see that, but I got to get my final three thoughts in, and none of them are about Rosario, who, by the way, have I ever mentioned how much I enjoyed watching him play baseball with the Twins? Thought number one, hopefully this will whet people's appetites. You'll go to Twins Daily and bring these into the forums and comments. Number one, Jake Odorizzi should be a priority. They need to add one more good quality starting pitcher. Odorizzi, in my opinion, is the number one guy on that list. Guys like Carlos Rodon, though, bring them in to compete with Randy Dobnak for spot number 5. I mean, there is a reason Rodon was taken as high as he was. He's just been hurt. So if they can get him on a minor league type of a deal or a low guaranteed deal, great. Thought number 2, Sonny Gray's name was out there as a possible non-tender throughout the day today. I think Colorado did tender him a contract, but that does mean, or that does tell us that he's probably available. There's another name to consider. And finally, here's my thought that as I can't get out of my head because I think, and I'm weird. How would this conversation, how would this non-tender day be different for Twins fans? And it was already exciting. Barrios got his contract. Rogers apparently is signing something. Buxton got $5.125 million. Garver, all these guys signed. What if they wouldn't have locked up Jorge Polanco, Max Kepler, and Miguel Sano over the last 2 years? Because their contracts, had they gone year to year like Rosario chose to do, because let's not forget, the Twins have made long-term contract extension offers to Rosario in the past that would have kept him in the organization longer. Kepler, Polanco, Sano accepted those deals in the last couple of years. How many of those guys would we be talking about as iffy on if they would bring back in arbitration this year? I think that's an interesting conversation that fortunately it's a hypothetical at this point because we don't have to think about that. But that might be benefit number 2 of signing those long-term deals early is that you don't have to worry about these arbitration days from year to year. So that was a little longer than I thought, but I also think that's just an interesting talker and would have made this a lot more interesting to have potentially 4 guys that are part of that core, and we're wondering whether or not they'll bring them back.
Yep. Fantastic point. Some good food for thought. You do wonder if, like Miguel Sano especially, that's a guy they'd be thinking about moving on from after the year he just had with his salary going up. And as it stands, he is locked in as one of their highest paid players at the present with an $11 million commitment in 2021. David, any final thoughts from you here as we depart, as you absorb the news of a busy non-tender day here? I see twinstakes.com says, hopefully the slow free agency period is now over. Let's see the frenzy. We can all agree with that. I'm not sure if it's realistic, just considering everything going on. But what are you expecting to sort of happen, and what dominoes are going to fall from here, David?
Well, I tell you what, I'm excited. If you would have told me these were the moves that would have been made a month ago, yes, I would have expected Rosario. Would not have expected Wisler. But Derek Falvey and Thad Levine are 2 of the best in the business, and I am ecstatic to see what's going to happen in the next couple of months here. This was a Twins team on paper this last year that was, preseason ranked as one of the best rosters and lineups in Major League Baseball. And I think that's going to be the case this next year too. I sure hope it is. Part of that coming to fruition is a strong offseason, and we've got the guys to do it. So looking forward to it.
I'm with you. And just one correction that was mentioned by a commenter here. Seth was referring to John Gray, not Sonny Gray. It's very easy to say the wrong name as you're talking on these things. I've noticed. I was listening back to the trade episode, and I noticed that at one point I referred to Blake Snell as Ian Snell, which I was like, where did that name come from? And then I looked it up, and I was like, oh, he was like a random infielder for the Pirates like a long time ago. How was that in my head? I don't even know.
Yeah, I dropped Jeremy Affeldt tonight, so I'm with you.
That's true. That was a good one. All right. Well, hey, everybody. Thank you so much. We went a little longer than we expected, but you guys were just so fun to interact with, and a big day and a lot of news for the Twins. So make sure you come by twinsdaily.com. We'll continue to cover everything, highlight some more, I'm sure, of these non-tender players as fits for the Twins. And, of course, all the news, insight, analysis will be available to you there. And if you like to share your thoughts, you can always blog it yourself for the audience there as well. Let's have a little fun this offseason. We'll continue to do it here on Offseason Live when the moment strikes. So thank you, Seth. Thank you, David. Thank you to everyone who joined us here tonight. And have a wonderful rest of your week.
Win Twins.